The following presentation is sponsored by South Carolina Humanities, a nonprofit organization supported in part by the National Endowment of the Humanities.
Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Dan Turner, Head of Programming and Outreach for the Georgetown County Library. We're here also to celebrate not just Halloween, but our Georgetown County Library 225th anniversary. This library services have been around in the county, offered in this county since 1799, 1 year longer than the Library of Congress. So yeah, that's a big deal, and we're celebrating that. And we got a wonderful grant from the folks at South Carolina Humanities, so we're grateful to them. Their generous support of this series and that have helped us to celebrate our 225th year of library services here. And we've been able to bring in some wonderful speakers. The videos of the presentations are online. If you missed one of these presentations, at the Georgetown County YouTube channel, Georgetown County Library YouTube channel, I should say. And today we'll also be filming this presentation with our brand new videographer, Giovanna Davis. So we want to welcome her. Good. We're happy to have her with us today. And because of this grant, as I said, we're able to bring in some wonderful folks to talk to us about Georgetown County's rich, complex history and culture. And today we've got a superstar, Dr. Valinda W. Littlefield, PhD. This will be a very condensed professional biography about Littlefield, but I do want to give you some sense of who she is. I guess we could. Yeah, I could, instead of this pumpkin shirt I could wear, she's kind of a big deal. Sure, that's because she definitely is. Dr. Littlefield is Associate Professor Emerita History at the University of South Carolina, up the road in the Midlands in Columbia, and Interim Director of the USC Buford Institute for the Study of the Reconstruction Era. She received a BA in History and a BA in Political Science from North Carolina Central University and a PhD in History from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Littlefield specializes in late 19th and 20th century African American history. Her current research focuses on African American rural Southern women school teachers during the Jim Crow era. She is a co-editor of South Carolina Women, Their Lives and Times, a 3-volume account of South Carolina women published by the University of Georgia Press, and she is also an editor of 101 Women Who Shaped South Carolina, published by the University of South Carolina Press. And Dr. Littlefield has provided leadership in a wide array of committee roles at the University of South Carolina, as well as tons and tons of community and statewide service. To list just a few brief roles, she served on the boards of the South Carolina Historical Society, the South Carolina State Museum, the South Carolina Academy of Authors. I had the pleasure of serving with her on that. One Columbia, the South Carolina Council for African American Social Studies, and that list goes on for a while. So she's definitely not just an ivory tower academic. She's out in the community and is someone who is committed to service, making her scholarship matter. So she's done all that. She's also been involved in several large oral history projects since coming to South Carolina, including Gadsden and our beloved Georgetown. And she's going to talk about that. So that's one of our prize a memory spark project, our oral history project here at Georgetown County with the librarian, and she'll be speaking to that today. So just one final point. She has many, many accolades, but I just wanted to add this, that she was honored this year, 2024, with the University of South Carolina College of Arts and Sciences Distinguished Faculty Award. So let's please welcome in the distinguished professor, Dr. Valinda W.
Thank you so much, and for coming out at 10 o'clock this morning. Love your library, by the way. It is gorgeous. I had not seen it. I'd heard about it, but it is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm a little envious. I'm going to give Dwight and his staff a shout out for inviting me today. Dan's been my main contact. And the newbie, Javon, for helping me with technology. And I suspect Trudy told her that I was a dinosaur because she emailed me as soon as she got hired and offered to help. I arrived in South Carolina in fall of 1999. And by spring 2000, I received a call from Dwight McInville. Someone had told him that I had expertise in oral interviews, and he wanted to know if I could visit Georgetown and discuss some potential projects. 20 years later, I'm still in a happy space working with the Georgetown Library and staff. At the beginning, this was in 2001 and 2002, we started a project that interviewed 10 men who had grown up at Georgetown, 5 Black, 5 white. So I served on a committee that selected those 10 women first. Those 10 women, we did oral interviews with those women. Heather was the videographer at the time, and she taped everything. Trudy went with us everywhere and did lots and lots of work behind the scenes. And once we finished taping the 10 women, we broke them down into themes: family, careers, race was one of those issues we talked about. Anything about their experiences in Georgetown, holidays, we asked questions and then broke them up into themes. So we also, with the Humanities Grant, brought in scholars. And at the Strand Theater, anybody here that came to those events? Oh, you missed a treat. We had 7 themes for the women. And for 7 Friday nights at the theater, we showed short documentaries, 45 minutes to an hour. And then we had a scholar to talk about whatever the theme and to facilitate discussion. Let me tell you, that was a lot of fun. We had over those 7 nights, we had over 800 people attend. One night we had almost 200. And people kept coming back because they were that fascinating. If you were not here, and I don't see anybody who was, they are online. And so you should by all means go online and look at them. When we finished with the women, the men said, well, what about us? Shouldn't we say, okay? And they were not going to be outdone by the women. And so an anonymous donor made a financial donation. You have to go back to the Humanities Council. They made a donation that we would do 10 men. So I came back with a colleague of mine. I'm one of those oral interviewers. You have to know your audience. I felt pretty safe interviewing women because I am a woman. But interviewing men, you always have a backup. So I brought my male colleague with me. And I said, if any point, any of the males look at you more than they look at me when I'm asking a question, I need you to take over that interview. He didn't have to. It worked out great. But just in case, we did 10 great men. I'm telling you, that too was a blast. The men came prepared. They had their memorabilia. They had photographs, they had letters, they had all sorts of things that the videographer captured to tell their stories. And they were very forthcoming, like the women. And it is one of the oral history projects that I still talk about as being one of the best oral history projects I've ever done. And I've been doing oral history a long, long time. And so then in 2015, they brought me back to do 10 artists. Then in 2017, I did Miss Ruby's family. Miss Ruby, the school teacher at Polly's Out. So let's talk about a little bit about that. So as you can tell, I could drive the back roads to Georgetown in my sleep. I made new friends. Minnie Kennedy, Sis Peterkin, Dorothy Taylor, Phil Wilkinson, Dwight, Trudy, and Heather and Julie became my Georgetown family. Minnie insisted that I stay with her whenever I came to Georgetown for any reason. She walked most places and had the body of a 16-year-old. She was feisty and quick to tell you what she thought about anything and everything. She introduced me to her friends who were similar in personalities, and one of them drove real fast, riding with Minnie and her girls. Minnie died several years ago, and I miss her dearly. Now, my friend Phil welcomes me to stay at his place. And my friendship with him has only grown, and I'm further impressed since the first interview that I did with him. He's multi-talented. I often call him the alligator man because he spent a lifetime studying them. He is also a great photographer of wildlife and landscapes, especially endangered species. Throughout South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, I didn't leave out any state field. And if you get a chance to see his photography, and hopefully you will because the library is digitizing them, or if you get a chance to see the furniture he's made, Champagne. I'm still trying to figure out how to get some of the stuff out of the house without him noticing that I'm taking the stuff out of his house. This was a very hard task, deciding what to talk about today. There are so many lanes I could have taken. I thought about using common themes in all the interviews I did. For example, all the interviews in the first two projects talked about changes in Georgetown. I'm making a notice of time. Sis Peterkin lamented over development in areas and the fact that people were building on beach land in Burroughs Inlet, land that our grandfather said no fool would or should build on. Dorothy Taylor talked about her parents paying a paving assessment for the streets and sidewalks in Georgetown. Patricia Doyle remembered changes the paper mill brought, such as a huge influx of new people from Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Then the steel mill brought in Germans and others who lived in urban areas. She stated that most people in Georgetown did not go out to eat at the time. Even the paper mill closed for lunch from 12 to 1 so people could go home and eat. Both influx of new people brought changes like more restaurants and grocery selections. Said she'd never had fresh mushrooms or spinach, but she did for the newbies cake. The women and men conversation on race relations were thought-provoking, as well as emotional. Mr. Drayton said Georgetown was 95, he was the historian of Georgetown of African American history. So Georgetown was 95% African American after the Civil War. Reconstruction lasted in Georgetown from 1865 until 1910. He said Front Street businesses were predominantly black-owned: groceries, drugstores, barbers. The first elected congressman was from Georgetown, black congressman. The entire police department, he said, was African American. And he said both races worked together. Sis Peterkin's story and Dorothy Taylor's story allowed me to understand Georgetown during the Jim Crow era. And I'm going to just advise you to look at those two videos. An underlying theme is that Georgetown County did not experience violence like other parts of South Carolina, yet racism was part of the fabric. All had stories of experiencing or recognizing it. Most also remember a community that wanted to see progress in race relations, and they found ways to do it. I could have gone down a lane with the 10 artists, from painters to dolls, quilt to cane makers, or Miss Ruby's 71 years teaching on Pawleys Island. I decided on one woman in the first group we met, and using her oral interviews, examining her life experiences with that of another person connected with her, Belle Baruch. The simple title, Parallel Lives, Belle and Minnie, provides windows to glimpse differences, similarities, and connections of two people who treasured the same place and left us a legacy of perseverance and determination to make a difference. Neither liked either one. They were definitely frenemies, sometimes enemies. But they did respect certain things about each other. And that's what I tried to capture when I was listening to Minnie. So I want to do the PowerPoint presentation. I want to give you some visual images of their worlds. This is Springfield Village, where Minnie grew up. And many of you, how many of you have been to Hopkop? Everybody's been to Hopkop. Most people have been to Hopkop. So these are some of the cabins. They're still in existence. This is the Springfield Church. This is the inside of one of the cabins. This is a photograph of Minnie's sister, Mary. And so that was the wedding party. And we don't know, she couldn't remember who the two little Marines were. But that is the wedding. And if you will notice, you will see this one, Yoey. If you notice there are, in the background, you can see fencing. And I asked Minnie about the fencing, and she said the fencing was to keep the wild animals out, not the animals in, because I was thinking you had cows and chickens and meat. No, that was to keep the wild stuff out. If you don't ask the right question, and you have to ask lots of them. This is where Belle Baruch lived when she came to Hopkop. Two images thanks to Georgetown Library. This is an image of a room. It's on the right-hand side, like a sitting room. And this was Belle's house. So this is Belleville. And these are some Belle's horses. It's just one of those, no sound, just you get to enjoy looking at the horse leash and Belle. This is Belle going hunting. One of her favorite things to do. It was, after all, a hunting retreat. Has anyone seen these images? You've and Jake.
Thanks. You got one. Get to your G. Anything you used to.
Minnie talks about this in her oral interview. This is Easter at Bellefield, and I want you to pay attention to what's happening here. This is bad. Where did you? The next one is Mitty, one of the oral interviews.
I was working as a counselor in camp, summer camp, and one of the camps I worked in was all white. The kids pay like $700 and $800 a week for 2 weeks. They were rich parents and all that. And I was a counselor. And right across the highway was Miss Roosevelt's home in Hyde Park. So I got the nerve to get on the phone and call the Miss Roosevelt on her phone, ask her, and these were all white kids. There wasn't a black kid in that camp because they couldn't pay that kind of money anyhow. So I called Miss Roosevelt, said, I'm in the camp, I'm counseling in the camp right across the road from you, and I wonder if you would let us come with the kids to visit with you sometime, just to see where you live. Oh yes, she says, come anytime, that's how she told me. So I took all these, it was about 11 kids, I guess, or something like that, all white. When she was so pleasant to say, yes, come, I told her, let's take our sleeping bag and we could sleep on her lawn. So we did. We took advantage of Miss Roosevelt. Miss Roosevelt got up the next morning, put on her apron, set up a broiler or something on her lawn, set up a chair out on her lawn for each kid. It was about 13 of us. Then she be sitting down. She made the breakfast, hot dog, and so people eat for lunch. She made it for the kids' breakfast, and went to each kid. What would you like? Would you like a soda? Would you like milk? And she went to each kid, whatever they said they want, she provided it. Had a cooler with the ice and all in it and all. And went around to each kid and gave them what it was. And when we were finished, we cleaned it. And she took us to see her husband's grave.
Thank you. So I wanted to give you a visual image of their worlds, and now I'm going to give you an oral vision of their work. I'm going to talk about Minnie first. Her name was Minnie Agatha Kennedy. She was born December 25th, 1960, and she died January 14, 2014. She was 97 years old. She was an American educator, civil rights activist, and a philanthropist. She was the granddaughter of enslaved people. Her maternal grandfather was Moses Jenkins, and he was the first minister of Friendfield Church that was built in 1890. The bell tower was added in 1905. Her father, William Kennedy, was born in 1885, and he served as a handyman, personal valet, and a hunting guide. And she considered him an excellent duck hunter, and lots of people wanted him to take them duck hunting. The mother, Daisy Jenkins, was born somewhere around 1887. She served as a cook for the route. And she said that in October they would receive a letter telling them when the Briggs planned to arrive, and that they tended to stay until May. The Kennedys were responsible for preparing the house and the grounds for arrival. Daisy birthed of 13 kids. That's how many kids Minnie's mother had and she started birthing kids at the age of 12. 7 died in infancy. The only son, who was a teenager / young adult, many described him, died in a drowning incident. On the video, she tells a story about recovering his body that sends chills down. You should look at it. Minnie was next to the last born. She attended Strawberry School, a one-room elementary school built by Baruch in 1918, and then she came to Georgetown and attended Howard. Her parents purchased a house, and her grandmother lived with the Gurries during the school week. She graduated high school, attended South Carolina State in 1935, majoring in political science and history. She became an Episcopalian while she was on campus. She taught for 3 years at Howard in Georgetown, then she moved to New York, and all of her sisters ended up getting that train migration.
With me.
She was snubbed by the New York State Board of Education in the early 1940s, told her accent was a problem. She worked in several private nursery schools and began to gain a name for herself. Parents requested her for their children. Parents stated that their kids were well patient, better mannered, noticed that their children were excelling in speech and other areas. So her reputation spread and schools began calling her, including NYU. During the World War II, she was a Rosie in the Riverton. She held various teaching positions from early childhood classroom to college courses. She taught at New York University School of Education, Connecticut State College, Adelphi University Urban Education Center, and the City College of New York Comprehensive Daycare Teacher Training Center. Head Start selected her to direct all of its programs in New York State. She traveled extensively, both throughout the United States and abroad, and she served as an educational consultant to various schools and universities. And the schools she felt needed the money the most, whenever they paid her, she gave the money back to them. She was also actively involved in civil rights projects, including the March on Selma, Alabama, the 1963 March on Washington, and CORE's voters registration projects in Louisiana and Mississippi. She taught the Constitution so that African Americans pass the test in order to vote. She retired from the position of professor of education at the Bank School College of Education in New York in June of 1984. She started working on a house on Queen Street to move her mother in with her, and her mother died shortly before she could get moved into the house. So when she got the house finished, she still moved back to Georgetown, and she joined Prince George Munya Episcopal Church, where she was a former member of the Docent Program and Episcopal Church of Women. She also preserved history on Southbound. Belle Wilcox Baruch was born August 16, 1899, and she died April 25, 1964. She was an American equestrian, sailor, and philanthropist. When the U.S. Embassy in France would not issue her a license to ride in international shows because she was a woman, she obtained one from the French. In 1930 and 1931, she was awarded the President of the Republic's Cup for winning the classic competition in the Paris Horse Show. And in the 1931 competition, she was the only one of 119 contestants to post a perfect score. She won more than 300 prizes in competition in France and other countries. Her father, Bernard Baruch, was a financier, stock investor, statesman, political consultant, and between 1905 and 1907, he purchased 16,000 acres, which we now call Popco. Their mother was Annie Griffin, and you read very little about the mother. It's part of historians not listening to the women, what can I say? Belle was the firstborn and one of 3 children. She was born with a gold spoon, showered with gifts, sterling silver cups, spoons, plates, gold and silver rows, inlaid mother of pearl, and tiny silver belts. Pearl and diamond pins adorned her silk coat and lace dresses. The brother, born when she was 3, and as soon as he was born, a sibling rivalry occurred that did not end until her death. They had few interests in common. As children, each had their own nanny. The father was often absent with work, sometimes for months, and the mother was busy with social responsibilities for a woman of her wealth. Most of her growing years she was reminded to act like a lady. However, she loved competition, and most of all, she loved to win. And that was very problematic for a woman being a lady. She could outride, outshoot, outhunt, and outsail most men, and she was 6 to them. She was described as energetic, restless. She craved adventure and excitement. She was independent and determined. She was also a Jewish Christian. Her mother was Jewish and her father was Christian. She had this north-south heritage, father southern, mother northern. And so you can see some of the tensions that as a child she's going to encounter and as a young woman. Her privileges of great wealth were also tempered with strict social responsibility. Wealth did not shelter her or her siblings from anti-Semitism. She was denied admission to the exclusive Chaikin school that their mother had attended. Country clubs of the elite were also off limit, as well as Greek fraternities and sororities. Her father purchased Habakkuk when she was 6, and it became her paradise. So that's a little bit about Belle and Minnie. So let's play with them together. What do they tell us? What do their experiences tell us about a place over time and people who love the same place or same space? What obstacles did they face as female? What obstacles did they face because of race, class, ethnicity, or religion? And what were the strategies they used to overcome some of these obstacles? And what the legacies did they leave? Early life in Minnie, she used the proximity to the big house. There are some advantages to that. There is economic stability for Minnie and her family. There are also disadvantages. Always on call, all hours. Family interactions could be sporadic to non-existent. When you think about personal characteristics of Minnie, she's spirited, she's funny, she was blunt, she was community-oriented, she had a strong work ethic. If you moved to town or away from the state, you were not allowed to come back and live in Friendfield, nor were you allowed to be buried. And Minnie talks about the fact that her father, who grew up there, could not be buried because he had moved to the Georgetown area in old age. There are lots of similarities to the two. Minnie's idea of community involvement and support was ingrained in her for childhood. Belle's also, her idea of community was ingrained, but her community was tied to the land. And this is where she was saying, both preserved their memories of the land. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Both had access to political leaders. You heard Minnie talk about Mrs. Roosevelt. She campaigned for votes for JFK and attended his inauguration. She often saw, growing up, President Roosevelt at Hopcalp, but she was not allowed near him. Both became activists, another similarity. Minnie became a civil rights activist and Belle became a land preservation activist. Both were competitive and very outspoken, and I think that's why they bumped heads a lot. Both faced obstacles as for their gender, based on their gender. Belle faced obstacles because of her religion. Minnie was race, gender, color, class discrimination. She has a great story about how she is, in the colorism, Minnie is dark skinned. And at Howard, they wanted a light-skinned person to be the class speaker. And Minnie had the highest GPA, and somebody had to fight for Somebody had to fight to make sure that Minnie got to give a speech. And it's based only on her color, and she knew that. The legacies that they left, both were leaders. The strongest impact that many left was in the field of education, civil rights, activism, and preserving Springfield Village's history. Belle, the legacy that she left, her equestrian awards, but she also preserved the history of pop cult and the land, in that we have two institutes for them. One is the Belle W. Baruch Institute for Marine and Coastal Sciences, which the University of South Carolina is each part of, and the Belle W. Baruch Institute of Coastal Ecology and Forest Science, which Clemson is also a very big part of. So when you think about the legacy that they've left, you have to think about the fact that without those two people, without their experiences, we would not have Hop Gum, number one, because that was Belle. Belle recognized the importance of preserving it. We would not have the history of the African American section of Hop Gum without the work of Benny Hinn. Minnie drew a model of her memories growing up, and that's a great description. I don't know where that model is now, but it was a great model. And so when you think about putting the two of them together, the very strong legacy that they left means that they persevered, they were committed to what they wanted to get done and what they wanted to see. And they also thought about others. That was extremely important to both of them. And they thought about the future. And when you have two people who think about the future, they may not like each other, but they leave a legacy that is intertwined, and a legacy that we are still reaping the benefits of, and future generations will continue to reap the benefits of. Thank you so much.